Shortly after this, a paper written by the saint and containing a masterly solution of a most abstruse question, fell accidentally into the hands of Blessed Albert. Astonished at the genius it displayed, he next day put the learning of his saintly disciple to a public test, and exclaimed before the assembled students, "We call Brother Thomas, the dumb ox, but I tell you he will one day make his bellowing heard to the uttermost parts of the earth." 2. Work in his order and in the Church. In the summer of 1245, a year after St. Thomas's arrival at Cologne, the General Chapter commanded Blessed Albert to proceed to Paris in order to take the degree of doctor in that university, and he obtained permission to take Brother Thomas as his companion. The two saints set out on foot, staff in hand, carrying on their shoulders the breviary and Bible, to which Brother Thomas added the book of sentences. At midday they rested by some spring to eat the food they had begged on their way. At night they generally found shelter in the guest quarters of some monastery. In this manner they reached the convent of St. James at Paris, where St. Thomas became the model of the whole community, by his spirit of prayer, his profound humility, perfect obedience, and universal charity. He tried to imitate the virtues he observed in his brethren, and judged himself utterly unworthy of living in such saintly company. Never was he known to utter an idle word. When he did speak, the charm of his heavenly conversation filled all who heard him with spiritual consolation. A celestial grace beamed from his beautiful countenance, so that some said they had only to look at him to feel within themselves a renewal of fervor. A young Franciscan was at this time studying at Paris, Bonaventure by name, to whom St. Thomas became knit in bonds of closest friendship. They, who were in after ages to be honored in the Church as the seraphic and angelic doctors, were dear to each other on earth as Jonathan and David, and after their 3 years of study, they were raised together to the degree of Bachelor of Theology, in 1248. In the November of that year, Blessed Albert was sent back to Cologne, again accompanied by St. Thomas, who taught under his direction. Scholars were not slow to discover that the two Dominican professors excelled all others, and the new school at Cologne was soon filled to overflowing. St. Thomas's lessons fully bore out the 5 principles of teaching which he has himself laid down, viz., clearness, brevity, utility, sweetness, and maturity. He possessed a wonderful gift of communicating knowledge, so that more was learnt from him in a few months than from others in several years. It was soon after his return to Cologne that the saint was raised to the priesthood. From that time he seemed more closely than ever united to God. He used to spend many hours of the day and a great part of the night in the church. Whilst offering the holy sacrifice he shed abundant tears, and the ardor of his devotion communicated itself to those who assisted at his Mass. After teaching for 4 years at Cologne, Thomas was ordered by the General Chapter to prepare to take his degree as doctor. This was a terrible blow to his humility, as he sincerely judged himself unfit for the dignity. On his way to Paris, whither he had now to repair, he preached at the court of the Duchess of Brabant, at whose request he wrote a treatise on the government of the Jews which is full of wisdom and moderation. Later on, he was often consulted on most important matters of state, especially by St. Louis of France, who was tenderly attached to him. He arrived in Paris in 1252, and from the first his success in teaching was so great that the vast halls of the convent of St. James were unable to contain his audience. The university congratulated the order on the acquisition of so great a treasure, and proposed at once to grant him the license preliminary to the acts required for taking the degree of doctor, although he was nearly 10 years under the age required by the statutes. But this step was delayed by a dispute which arose between the friars and the secular doctors. The quarrel originated in the refusal of the former to take an oath to close their schools whenever the rights of the university were attacked, and it was fanned into a flame by the publication of a book, entitled The Perils of the Latter Times, in which the new mendicant orders were attacked in the most calumnious and scandalous terms.